Okay, guys. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the most important thing yesterday we were doing examples. So we'll continue on a couple more examples related to the triggers. And then we will also talk about preventing recursion and what happens when you have a flow and a trigger. So we'll cover all these things today. Okay, so yesterday we did this trigger where we prevented the deletion of the account record when there is open opportunities or open cases tied to that particular account. So now the next scenario that we have is we don't want to allow the contact to be inserted. And the scenario is if the account is not active or it is blocked. Okay, if this is the condition, then we should prevent the contact creation. So now tell me what type of trigger should this be? And on which object should the trigger be?
Before insert,
On which object?
on case, right?
No, this is the scenario.
Oh, this is a scenario, sorry.
Contact.
I can't.
Before insert, on contact. Yeah.
Contacts, yeah, on
So this
contact.
is going to, because we want to prevent the creation of the contact object. So we have to make sure that the trigger is on the contact and it is on the before insert. Okay. So now in the case of before insert, what is the other thing we need to do? What is the steps? Tell me the pseudocode of how are you going to accomplish this? We discussed the pseudocode yesterday also related to this one. So whenever you are creating the contact record, there is a account you also can populate, right? So that will tie the contact to that particular account. So first, what we are going to do is we will gather all those contacts that we are trying to insert. Okay. And we will try to get the account IDs of all those contacts. And then we will do a SOQL query to figure out the so first important thing is we will go ahead and get all the account IDs from those contacts. Okay. We will get all the account IDs. Then we will do is a query to based on these account IDs. And we will fetch the is active. This is also a custom field. And there is a field called block. That is also a custom field. So we will go ahead and check the values for these two fields. And we will create a map. Map would be of the ID of the account versus the account object. Then we will iterate over all these contacts again that we are trying to insert. And we are basically fetching, give me the account based on this ID. And we are checking if the ID, if the account, the flag is not true and blocked is equals to true, then in that case, we will display a error message. So then we will have used this add error functionality to display the error message. So this is the pseudocode that we have written. Okay, so let me go ahead and first copy this code, contact account validation. And here, let me go to the developer console. Let me see if we already have this code. Okay, we do. Okay, so now here, this one, I already have the active flag. So if I go to the account object and we go over to the edit object, there is, I believe it's a pick list field, not a checkbox. So let me just make sure. If we go here, we do have active. So I'm going to copy this. And here I'm going to, it's a pick list. And the value of the pick list is yes or no. Okay, so we are going to see over here if the account dot active is equals to not equals to yes. Okay, or account is blocked. If it is account is not equals to yes or account is blocked, in both the scenarios, we will throw an error. So what we are doing is we are creating the trigger on the account object, and this trigger will get fired either you are trying to insert a new contact or you're trying to update the contact. Okay, so then first thing is we need to capture all the IDs. So this is what we are doing. So through trigger.of_new, we will go ahead and capture all the IDs of the account record. Then we are doing a query from the account record based on the account IDs to fetch the active flag as well as the blocked value. And then we are creating a map out of it. Okay. And then we are iterating over the trigger.of_new, means the contacts that we're trying to insert, and we are checking if that contact has an account ID. And if it has, we will retrieve the complete account from this map that we created earlier. And then we are checking what is the active value on that account and what is the blocked value. And if it matches, then we are throwing the error message. Is everybody understood what we are doing in this trigger?
Can you explain the last part, the for loop? I don't
The
understand.
for loop. Okay, so this trigger.new is basically going to give you all the contacts that you're trying to either insert or you're trying to update. Okay, so this will give you contacts. Now, on the contact, you are checking, are you populating the account ID? Is the account ID present? If it is, and we are checking if it is not equals to null. So this is the condition we are checking. And then if it is not equals to null, that means that contact has an account ID associated. So we are fetching that account based on the ID from this map. Okay. And then once you got the account value, you can do acc.of_active to figure out what is the active flag value. Then you can do acc.of_block to figure out what is the blocked value. And if the active is not equals to yes, and or blocked is also not true, blocked is true, in both the scenarios, you want to prevent the creation of the contact. So contact cannot add contact to inactive or blocked account. This is the error message it will throw. Everybody understood it?
For the account ID on the contact,
Yes.
you're looking at the account ID on the account, or the account ID is attached to the contact itself?
So on the contact object, we have an account ID field, which
Right.
ties the account, which ties the contact to that account.
Okay, so the process of loading this, let's say these were all new contacts that you were loading into the accounts. Is that what we're doing? Or the
No,
contacts
so
are
the
already
process is you're loading contacts,
right? So
right?
the contacts are already in the system and they have an
Your
account ID that's attached to them already.
account ID can be attached. Contact ID won't be there because it's an insert. Okay.
Okay.
So
So
let's say.
the mechanics of this, I'm a little hazy
Okay,
on.
I'll explain. I'll explain. So let's say accounts can be there, right? Account one is there, Bank of America, and that has an ID X12. Then there is Bank of Ozark is another account that has an ID of 12. This is account ID. Okay. This already exists in Salesforce. Now
Right.
what you're saying you are uploading the list of contacts. So you have contact that you're trying to insert. Let's say contact is Deepika. Okay, the last name is Khanna, and you are saying the account ID for this contact is X12. That means once this contact gets inserted, tie this contact to this account ID.
Okay. So it's really like a spreadsheet list of these contacts that you're loading in, but you have to have the account IDs on that spreadsheet. Am I right?
Exactly. So either you can do that, or if you go over to the, if you go here and if you try to, this is the trigger. Now, you can do it through that data loader, but you can go to the contact and you can try to create a new contact. And over here, you can populate the account as well. So here I can populate American Bank.
Yeah, if you do it manually, right?
Yeah,
If
if
you're
you're
doing
doing
a list. But
So
if you're doing
now,
a list this way, yeah, then it's different than you're doing through
no,
the
see,
Apex code.
you do it one record at a time or you do it 10 records at a time. your trigger is bulkified, means it will work for those 10 records also.
Okay.
What did you not understood, Linda?
I guess what I was thinking of, in other words, is to if you have the context, you'd have to look up then manually all the account IDs in order to put them on the spreadsheet, and then Apex would take over and load it, that spreadsheet. Or like you said, you would do it just manually here and load it one at a time.
Yeah.
So
How you got the spreadsheet is not our problem. Yes,
okay.
they will probably have to manually populate it, or yes, they
Okay,
will have to do
account
that.
IDs yeah, okay. I was just trying to figure out
Yeah.
how it was inputted. Okay.
So
Okay,
they
makes
will
sense.
say, okay, that this account, these contacts belong to this account, and you will populate the account IDs on them. That's not our problem, how we got the sheet. Our problem is,
Okay.
while they're trying to insert those contact records, you want to check which account they are being associated with. And if you are trying to associate them with an inactive account, you should get an error saying, hey, you cannot
Load it.
insert this contact.
Okay.
Okay.
I understand.
So this
Okay.
is, you can see here, American Bank. It's cannot add contact to inactive or blocked. So let's see what is American Bank has. So if I go here, and if you go to the American Bank, you will see, if you go to the details, blocked is not there. Where is let's do this, show all data. And here I'm going to check for active. So you can blank, okay. And why is it giving you? And then here it is also blocked. That is false. So both the conditions did not equals to yes.
So here is active is not yes. In our condition, is active is supposed to be yes, then only it will allow it to enter.
Yeah. So here, if I say is yes, or if it is yes, or if the blocked, no, that's what we want to do, right? We want to throw the error if it is not active.
Yeah. So that's why it's throwing, because that checkbox is not checked. That's why it's throwing error.
Oh, I know what you're saying. Okay, so here if I say active is equals to no. So if the active is equals to no, or the blocked, so here, now if I try to do it, okay, so now if I go ahead and go to active and make it yes. And now I should be able to add it, right?
Yes.
So if I go here and if I go to account is American Bank, and this time it should work. Yeah, so this time it will work. But if it was an inactive account or the blocked is equals to true, it will prevent it. Okay. Now the next one we have is the one of the frameworks, right? So ideally, why don't you want to put all the code inside of a trigger? What all things that you see, why does it say, and I've repeated it many times, is not to put the code inside of a trigger. You should have either trigger handlers or some Apex classes like a trigger handler, which will handle all the logic, and trigger code should be minimum. Now, why do you think that is the case?
To prevent a loop or in some way?
I think because each time, like for example, in contact, each time it's triggered, it's gonna load the whole code and it's kind of slows the system.
There are a couple of reasons why we prevent not writing the code inside of the trigger. And the reason is, first of all, if you write everything inside of a trigger, the trigger code will become huge. And there is no Apex class you write for triggers. Okay, so there is no way to test to what you call is to do the code coverage for those trigger. Okay, so first of all, one is it will become too long. Okay, And let's say, and there is no concept of functions also inside of triggers or methods. So if let's say there is a common logic that needs to be executed for during the update as well as during the before update, and also if you're doing an insert, that also common logic. So you will have to rewrite that entire logic for both the scenarios, and that will increase the size of your trigger. So writing code inside of trigger is not a good idea. So there are different frameworks around which you basically move that code out of the trigger to other classes. Okay. So one of the way is having a trigger handler. Okay. So that is one way, is you write the code, move the code from trigger into the trigger handler. But the problem with this also, you have to kind of route which logic to execute at what point from the trigger handler. So it is okay for normal or a simple what do you call use case, but in real world you will always see in some kind of framework. So there is a framework either called using virtual class. Okay, so you will have like a abstract class which you will extend, and the majority of the code will be you will using the framework. And the other kind is through the interface. So there is going to be an interface that you will have to implement, and using these frameworks you will be actually kind of putting the code from outside of trigger either to a trigger handler or to and the dispatching of those or the execution, all of these will be taken care by the framework itself. Okay, so how to do the virtual and interfaces, we'll come to that, but let's first understand the this particular framework which is having a trigger handler. So I have a scenario which says whenever account rating changes, okay, update all contacts. So basically all the contacts that are tied to that account, change the what am I changing here? I am changing the description. Okay, so from on those account description on those contacts. So inside of this, the logic is inside of the trigger handler, not inside of the trigger. So in the trigger, all I'm doing is I am saying what thing to call. Okay. So first important thing is I'm going to write is an account trigger. So we will go back, make sure we don't have existing triggers, because that way it is going to create problems. So I'm going to go ahead and do call Apex triggers, and let's just delete them. Okay, so here we will go to the developer console, and inside of this, I will create an Apex class, and we will call this as account trigger handler. Well, let me first write the code and then we will discuss what's going on. Account trigger handler, and this trigger handler is basically has all the code. And what trigger is doing, it is basically just telling which part of the code to execute from the trigger handler. Okay, so now we are creating the account trigger, and here we are doing it on the account object, that is the trigger. And now my trigger code is pretty simple. Now somebody, can you explain me what are we doing inside of our, let me pick up the person. Okay, let me pick up who is going to tell me. Okay. Let's pick up Gayatri. Gayatri, what are we doing here inside of our trigger handler class? I'm going to get rid of this, removing all my comments. Okay. Gayatri, can you hear me? You want to take a shot at it?
is Deepika, but I can't. Can you please somebody else?
Okay. Okay. So basically, let's try it. You're gonna try?
No, please somebody else.
Okay. Okay. So that's fine. So we have created a trigger handler, and inside of this, we have defined an after update, which means whenever, what are we doing here is whenever the rating of the account changes, you want to update the contacts. So this is going to be one after the account rating has been updated. So it's an after update. Okay, so you're creating a method. So if you see here, the trigger is going to run on after update, and the trigger is on the account object. So if the trigger is after and it is an update trigger, you are calling the account trigger handler after update method, and it is a static method. And this static method is expecting two lists here, two maps, one list and one map. So what is the list? It is the list of new accounts that on which you have updated the rating. And then you have a map of old values, means what was the previous rating value and what a map of those. Okay. So now trigger.new and trigger.old map, this is available in the trigger. These are context variable. You can't have trigger.new and trigger.old map in this handler. You cannot refer them because there's context variables are only available for trigger. So now what we're doing is we are basically iterating over all those newly updated accounts one by one. Okay, so we have a new list and then we have a map. So based on this, from this map, we are getting the older account value. What was the account values before you made the update? So you are checking, hey, did the value change? Because see, an update trigger can get fired on updating the description. It can get fired on updating anything else on the account, right? You only want to check if the rating has been updated. So here, that is what we are checking. All these accounts on which the rating has been updated. And if there is no accounts on which rating has been updated, nothing is going to happen. So we have a return statement. Nothing is going to happen. The execution will go back, return. Otherwise, if there are IDs on which of the account on which the rating has been updated, we are fetching all those contacts tied to those account IDs. Okay, so we are fetching all the contacts with account ID, the description from contact based on the account IDs, these account IDs on which the rating has changed. And then what we are doing is we are basically creating a map of ID, account, empty map so far. And then we are iterating over all those contacts one by one. And we are basically updating the description of those contacts. Okay, so we are updating the description of those contacts. And then we are doing an update operation on those contacts. So the trigger started on update of accounts, but actually it is updating the contacts at the end. Okay, so whenever the rating changes, it will update all the contacts that are tied to that account, and it is going to update the description of those contacts. Any questions on this trigger?
The very first line up above, you scroll up above, up
Yeah.
the top, on line 4.
Okay.
Set ID, change account.
Okay.
What is that actually doing?
So what is a set? Do you remember what was a set? We did that in collections. We had three things: list, set, and map. What is the thing about a set?
Unique
Anybody?
values.
No duplicates
Unique
in set.
values.
No duplicate, only unique values.
Unique
So
values.
basically, we are creating a unique list of IDs on which you have updated the rating on those accounts. So IDs of all those accounts where the rating has been changed. That is the set we are creating. So changed account IDs is a set of IDs, means only unique IDs can be present in this variable.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So if we If we want for line 7, we use the old map because we want to collect the current data.
We want to compare what
Correct.
was the previous value for the rating and what was the new value for the rating. Then only you know the rating has been updated.
So on which line we compare? Is it line 7 that we compare?
Line 9 number, the account dot rating with the old account rating.
Oh, okay. Makes
Okay,
sense.
so tell me, will the contact description be updated when you change account name?
No.
No.
Very good, because you are only collecting those records on which the rating has been updated. So if you update name on the account, it is not going to update the description. It is only going to update the contact description on which you are changing the rating of the account has been changed. Okay?
Right. And the method we use is the value of. Is that correct?
The string dot value of basically tells you what is the value of the rating field. And whatever the value is, it is converting it into a string value just for the comparison purposes.
Gotcha. So we need to convert it to a string. So if, like, for example, if it's pick list, it converted it to
Yeah, pick that
the
particular
string.
pick list value. Correct.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So that's what we are doing.
Deepika, just one question. So this trigger, it will get triggered when one account rating is changed or multiple account? Because
It will get triggered one or more.
Okay.
So if you're doing a data loader operation, this trigger will get fired for every basically all those accounts that you are updating. Or if you're doing it through the UI, you're changing one account at a time, so it will get fired for one account. But this trigger will fire, it can handle bulk records. So you can see here, it accepts new list and old map. So it's expecting not just one record, it is expecting more than one record.
Okay. So we are sending trigger.new from that other.
From this account trigger, correct.
Yeah, trigger.new. So trigger.new, it's not just one account, it's a list of
It's a list. It's a list of accounts.
Okay. And
Trigger.new is
trigger.old map, it's a
it's
map
a
of
map of IDs with the older version of those records.
multiple accounts.
Multiple, because it's a map. Map is also going to be a collection.
Oh, okay.
Also, Deepika, one thing, right? So, how means it's a real-time example where means I know it can work as multiplied, but in a real time, any real-time example for that?
Oh, real-time example for what?
For updating multiple. See, you said the trigger works on the single record as well as the multiple update, right?
Yeah.
So let's say if I'm updating any account, one record will come in the list. So any real-time example where multiple records get updated simultaneously.
Yeah, if you're doing a data loader operation, let's say you're inserting 100 account records through the data loader, all of them will fire the trigger. The trigger will get fired for them.
So is it okay? Got it.
Or you can do a simple debug. And if you want to do, let's say you want to, data loader can be one operation, or let's say you have, you can write a script to create test records. So for that also, these trigger will get fired if you want to do it for bulk run.
Okay.
Yeah, data loader is one good example when you are inserting multiple records at a time. If you are creating a script where you're creating some test records, in that also the trigger will get fired. So in both the scenarios, it will have a list rather than just a single record. When you're doing it through the UI, yes, you are only creating one record at a time, but there are operations of data loader, those will have multiple records. And that's why you'll also see when you are doing a data loader operation, they tell you, hey, do you want to deactivate the triggers or not? Because you don't want to cause the CPU timeout and all that. So sometimes they do turn off the triggers when they're doing some kind of operations.
is it possible to call trigger with an asynchronous process, batch process or anything?
Trigger automatically gets called. Batch process is a what do you call is an asynchronous operation, right?
Yeah.
So
From an
if
asynchronous process, can we call trigger?
from an asynchronous process, see, trigger, you cannot, how will you invoke a trigger? If in the asynchronous apex you are inserting records, the trigger will get fired.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you're doing any of these operations on which the trigger gets kicked off, yes, but you cannot explicitly say, hey, get the trigger fired. No, if through those asynchronous operations you have a account getting created, or list of those account getting created, or list of another answer to your question who asked just a few minutes ago, let's say you have a batch process which you are updating the status on or the rating of those account records, that also will have multiple records at a time. So that will also fire the triggers, and then in that case, trigger.new will have list of records.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the next one, so here the logic is, now the logic is from all that code that we used to write in the trigger, now it has moved to the account trigger handler. The purpose of explaining you this particular piece was to explain you the framework. Here, this is a trigger handler framework where the entire logic goes inside of the trigger handler, not inside of the trigger. All trigger is doing is just telling what to invoke at what situation. So all it is saying, if it is an after trigger and if it is an update operation, then call this account trigger handler. So this is one of the frameworks for the trigger. Okay. Now the next example we have, so this is there. Now the important point, this I won't cover it because it's pretty simple. Case status can move forward but never backward. You can have a case status defined that, okay, the new will have a value of 1, working will have a value of 2, escalated will have a value of 3, closed will have a value of 4. And if it is, if you're changing from 1 to 2, it is okay. But if you're moving from escalated to working, should be prevented. So you can check what was the old value, what is the new value. And if it is less than, then you should prevent it. If it is greater than, you should be okay. I'm not going to explain this, but this is pretty straightforward. Okay. Now, another very important topic that we need to talk about is recursion and how you can prevent recursion. So explain to me what recursion is. Anybody know what recursion is?
I think it's just two transactions happen at the same time. A trigger triggers another operation. So two operations at the same time.
No, that is concurrent.
Recursion is something that we are doing same thing,
Calling
same thing
again.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's getting into it. So for example, let's say if we have a account trigger, okay? This trigger gets fired when you update the account. When you update the account, the trigger gets fired. Now, let's say through this trigger, you are updating the contact. Okay? And then what happens is at the end, you're updating the contact, which you can do, which we just saw, right? We updated the contact. Now, when we update the contact, what will happen? A contact trigger will be fired. And let's say contact trigger code is updating the account. Now, in this case, what's going to happen? This trigger is firing another trigger. This trigger is firing this trigger, which updates the account, which will again call this trigger. So it will run into an infinite loop that is called as recursion, and that needs to be prevented. Okay. So if you have one particular recursion in triggers happen, when a trigger causes another DML operation that refires the same trigger directly or indirectly. So from account, you updated the contact, which fired the contact trigger, and that trigger updates the account, which fires the account trigger again. So this kind of goes into a loop. Okay. So common causes of recursion is updating the same object inside its own trigger. So if you have written, if you have an account trigger, within that trigger, you have an update again, which will again fire that same trigger. So that will cause recursion. Two objects updating each other, account updating contact, contact updating account, that will also result into a recursion. Multiple triggers firing in one transaction. So if there are multiple kind of the triggers which can cause recursion, and after triggers doing DML on the parent records, which is just like the contact updating the account, will cause into recursion. Okay.
So what happened if you hit, I mean, if you hit the recursion, what are the
So you
results?
basically, it's like an exception comes, and you basically the program will halt, and you will see the error showing up. I'll show you how when a recursion happen, it is basically going to give you an error saying, keep on, like it will show you, hey, I'm trying to execute it, and it'll time out.
Is it similar to the flow, like, the flow runs in a loop,
Yeah.
infinite loop?
Yeah,
You just put it.
it's the same way.
Mhm.
Trigger is also running into a loop, and it isn't, because one thing is updating the other thing, and the other thing is updating the first thing, so it will keep on executing. It doesn't know when to exit out. Okay, so you can see here, this is a bad trigger which gets called on after update, and then within this after update, you are doing another update operation. So what will happen is this trigger will get fired again. So there is no way when the trigger will stop running. So this is going to cause recursion. Okay. So how to prevent it? So there is something called as static variables we will use in order to check, is the trigger ran already? And if the trigger already ran, we won't rerun it. And if the trigger hasn't run, then only we will run the trigger. Okay. So static variable basically exists only for the current transaction, and it is shared across trigger execution. So as I know, if you remember, what is a static variable, right? The same copy is available for all the objects. So that's why we are using a static variable, and it resets after the transaction ends, and throughout the transaction, the value remains the same. Okay, is shared across trigger executions. And so let's say how this happens. Okay, so what causes the recursion? Account trigger updates the contact trigger updates the account, and then it refires the account trigger, which will run into the infinite loops. Okay, so now let me show you, if you don't use these variables, what will happen, and when you use these variables, what will happen. Okay, so this is my let's go back here. I have a account trigger created on the account object called account trigger no guard. But before I do that, let me first go to Apex triggers. Deleting it. So here we will go to the developer console. And inside of this, I will create a trigger called account trigger no guard. Okay, so I'm not putting any check. So here I will go to file, new, Apex trigger. It is no guard. It is on the account object. Hit submit. What happened here? Okay. I just had an extra space. Okay. So now I will, inside of this, I'm going to go ahead and okay. So what this is doing, this trigger gets fired on the account object once the account object gets updated. Okay, so you can update anything on the account object, name, description, anything. Okay, so now here you are iterating over all the accounts that you just updated. Okay, so all the accounts that you updated, and you are fetching the this is a bad example, but that's okay because we have a for loop inside of the trigger.new, which is not a good practice. But since we are running it for one record, it's fine for the timing. Okay, so we are iterating over we are fetching all the contacts associated with that account. Okay, and then we are basically updating the description of that contact. So the account trigger is updating the contact. Okay. Now, when you update the contact, if there is a trigger on the contact object, that will get executed, right? So here I will create a new trigger, and that trigger is on the contact object, and the trigger is called contact trigger no guard. File, new, Apex trigger, and this is on the contact trigger, and it is on the contact object. So I will select the contact object from the list here. It is right here. Hit submit. And now what will happen is this is my trigger, and this trigger is updating the account. Okay. So now if I go here, so this is the trigger. So this is on this gets fired whenever you update the contact. So this trigger will fire your contact trigger. Now inside of the contact trigger, you are basically figuring out all the contacts that got updated, and you are checking what is the account IDs of those contacts. Okay. And then you are updating the description of those accounts, and you are doing an update. So now what will happen is account trigger is firing the contact trigger is updating the accounts, which will again fire the account trigger. So this will result into recursion. Everybody understood why we are getting into recursion? Because account trigger is updating the description of the contacts, and then trigger is being fired, and that contact trigger is updating the description of those accounts. Okay. And then the update is happening, which will fire the account trigger again. So this will result into recursion. So what will happen is if you try to update the account, let's say if I go ahead and update the account here from account 1 to, let's say, account main recursion. Okay, this is the one. Now, if I try to hit save, you will see what happened here. What happened? How come this got saved? Trigger.new. What do you mean? This doesn't work.
Is there any contact related to this account?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's the problem. Yeah. Very good. Yep. So let me see. Okay, so this is the one. Now, if I go ahead and update the account name, American recursion check. So now will sit save, and you can see here the this is the trigger even getting fired, and basically this is how the error will show up, because it is kind of getting into this whole loop that, okay, this trigger being fired and the other, then it's kind of hit the snag here. Because this is happening because it getting into an infinite loop. One is updating the other, and then the other is again coming back and updating it. Okay, so how can we prevent this with the help of static variables? So let's first look at that. So before I do, everybody understood how the recursion happened?
Yes, and why we don't use trigger new in for loop? It's because it causes some recursion too.
No, it doesn't cause recursion, but if there was 200 or 400, let's say 1,000 records, you're running this for each of the account ID, which is not a good thing. So you're putting a for loop inside we're putting a query inside a for loop, which is never a good practice.
Oh, you're referring to the query one part.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah. So here I'm going to go ahead and go back. Before I do that, let me delete the triggers. Okay. So now here, let's first understand how the recursion will be prevented. Okay, so I'll go back. So I'll create a recursion guard here. So this is my class file, close all, file, new. Recursion guard, and inside of that, I have two static Boolean variables defined. Okay, so it is just setting up the two static variables. The value is false. Account trigger ran is false and contact trigger ran is false. Okay, means none of the triggers are running at this point. And then I'm creating an account trigger. File, new, Apex trigger, account trigger on the account object, hit submit. And here I am running this trigger. So first we are checking what is the value of account trigger ran. If the value is true, means the trigger is already running and already ran, that means we are not going to do anything. Okay, we're not going to rerun it. So that's the first check we are doing. Okay, means we are checking what is the current value of this variable, and if within the same transaction, this value will persist within that transaction. So recursion guard account trigger ran is equals to true. If it is not true, then we are setting up the value. Okay, it means the trigger has already ran, so we're setting up the value to true. And then what we are doing is we are iterating over all the accounts that we just updated. And then we are checking, hey, is the has the account name changed? Means what was the old value of the name on the account versus the new value of the name on the account? If it changed, we will go ahead and fetch the contact associated with that account. Okay, and then we are updating the contact description, and we are basically doing the this is updating the contact. Okay, so account, if the name has been changed on the account, we are basically updating the description on the associated contact, and we are saying account rename to whatever the new name is. Okay, so if this trigger is running, if the account trigger ran, the value would be updated to true, means this has already been executed. Now if you go ahead and write the contact trigger, so we will go ahead and do the same check in the contact trigger. So this is my contact trigger, and this is on the contact object. Hit submit, and we are going to check the same thing for the contact, and in the contact we are updating the description. Okay, so here we are checking, hey, is the contact trigger ran? Okay, if it already ran, we will just return, not going to do anything. We won't rerun this trigger again, but if it didn't, we will set the value to true. Okay, then we are checking all the contacts which have been updated, and we are collecting the IDs of the accounts on those contacts. Okay, and then what we are doing is we are fetching the description of those accounts, and it's a description and ID of those accounts, and we're iterating over those accounts one by one and updating the description saying updated from contact trigger, and adding system.now will give you the current date and time. And then we are updating the account. So this will again fire your account trigger, but at that point the value of the account trigger ran will be true. Okay, so then it will not go ahead and run the trigger again. Does it make sense?
Can you explain it a little bit? I don't
Okay.
understand.
So see here, let's do this. So first of all, in the account trigger, we created first of all, we have two static variables. Okay, we had two static variables. One is saying the contact trigger ran. It is a Boolean value, contact trigger ran, and then another one is account trigger ran. And the default values means the of both of them is equals to false. This is also false and this is also false. So if let's say you updated the account. Okay, you updated the account. What will happen? The account trigger will get fired. Now, inside of the, once it comes to the account trigger, the first thing it is checking, what is the value of this flag? Okay, what is the value of the account trigger ran? If the value of account trigger ran is true at that point, then it is going to do nothing. It'll just return, nothing will happen. Otherwise, it will set the value to true. Okay, it will set the value to true. Now, the next thing we are checking is what all accounts have been updated. Okay, and what has been updated on those accounts. So here we are checking the, going back to this account trigger. Here we are checking the old and new value of the name. Hey, did you change the name on the account? If you did, then you are fetching all the contacts tied to that particular account. Okay, and then we are updating. What we are doing, we are iterating over those contacts one by one, and we are updating the description of those contacts, and we will update the description saying account renamed to, and what is the new value of the account. And then we are adding those contacts that we updated back to this update list. Okay, which is nothing but a list that you are the list of contacts that you are updating. And then we are checking if the list is not empty, we are doing a DML operation. So did you understand this trigger, Mehdi?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, now what is contact trigger doing? Pretty similar. We are checking, hey, if the trigger if this static variable is false or true. If it is true, we won't do anything. If it is false, we will continue. And then the moment we continue, we will set the value to true so that it doesn't run again. Because again, if the check is going to be made, it will return. Then we are iterating over all the contacts that you are trying to update. And then from those contacts, you fetched all the IDs of the accounts. Okay. And if there are IDs, then you are fetching the description of those accounts based on those IDs. And then we are updating the description on those accounts. And then we are doing a DML operation on that. So this is going to fire account trigger again. But at that point, your context, sorry, not context, but this trigger ran will already be true. So this trigger won't run again. So you won't get into the recursion. Okay, so now if I go ahead and update the account field, let's go ahead and do this. Let me delete this. So if I go here, this one has contacts. If you see Jemmy Harissa, let's go to details. The description is blank here. If you go to the account and let's look at the description of the account also, it is also, where is the description? Let me see. Okay, description is also blank. So now if I change this American Society, let's say, just put it something. You're updating the name. That means now the contact description will be updated. So if you go here to the related, just go to the contact, the description of this particular contact got updated and it says account renamed to American Society. Now, if you go to this account, you will see the description has been updated and the description says updated from contact trigger at this point, at this time. Okay, so this is how the recursion can be prevented with the use of static variables. So you set the value to false, then you check the value once the trigger is started to run, and then within that transaction, it won't rerun the trigger again. Any questions, guys? Okay, so I have an assignment for you. And the assignment is pretty simple for tomorrow. So everybody should do it. And the assignment is, I want to know what will be the order of execution. Okay, if let's say you have the trigger as well as, I want you to know to test both the things. Okay, So you will create a trigger. You will create a before update trigger, and you will also create a after update trigger. Okay. And similarly, you will create a flow, which is a before flow and an after flow. Okay. And you have to tell me what will be the order of execution. Okay. So what I'll give you in what I have done here is I have created a trigger on the where is it? Yeah. I've created a trigger, which is a before insert trigger. And what it is doing is it is basically populating some values on those account object. Let's say you're creating an account with a name. Then we are populating some values. Let's say we are populating the industry, we are populating the description. And then if the account name has any spaces, we are trimming those. Okay. Now, similarly, you will create a flow as well. Through the flow, you will update the description again, let's say. Okay, so what will be the final value of the description on that account? Will it be the trigger ran or will it say flow ran? If let's say from the description you are in the flow, you're updating it to flow ran. What will be the final value? Can anybody tell me? So let's say my question is, let me repeat my question. Let's say there is a flow. Okay, flow is also a before insert flow, before the record gets inserted, and it is updating the description of the account to flow ran. Okay, and then I have a trigger, which is a before insert trigger, and here the description says the trigger ran. So the final account record that I will load, what will be the value of description? Will it be trigger ran or will it be flow ran?
I think it will be flow ran because the trigger will be fired first and then flow will be executed.
What is the order of execution?
I think it will be trigger ran
Trigger.
because I think flow gets executed first, right?
Yeah. Before flow gets executed, then before trigger. After trigger gets executed, then after flow gets executed. Okay, remember that. Before flow gets executed, then before trigger. Then after trigger executes first, then after flow gets executed. Okay, so in this case, the description would be equals to trigger ran. So this is what I want you to do as an assignment. So you will go ahead and create this flow, create the account trigger, and see what will be the final outcome. And similarly, you will do it for an after update as well as after through the trigger as well as through the flow, and then see what's going on. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, guys. So tomorrow, I will give you another thing I wanted to talk to you about is the trigger framework. It's not too big, but it has a lot of code. So I don't know how to. I will have to first rewrite the code in my loc, but it's a little I would say more coding to understand than for me to explain. But if I would share with you a link to come prepared for tomorrow's class. Okay. I believe it is from Trigger Framework. We won't go into all the nitty-gritties, but we will do, we already did Trigger Handler Framework, but you can go through this article which is available, and you can go through using a virtual class and using an interface. These are the two trigger handler pattern. We already looked at it. We will talk about these three tomorrow. Virtual class, interface, and this. And with this, your trigger is almost done. There's nothing I have missed in the triggers. Okay, so we'll cover these frameworks tomorrow. I will have to do a lot of coding to explain this, but it's just like a framework. What is a framework? Framework eases your development effort. You can do a lot of reusability through that. So that is what the purpose of a framework is. Okay, so with the handler classes, we still have to write the code to invoke which part of the handler to be invoked. Whereas when you use a virtual class or an interface, that running of the which method and everything is taken care by the framework. Okay, so that is the beauty of the framework. So there are either you can do virtual class or you can do the interface. But before coming it to the class, please go through this article. It's pretty good. Okay.
Okay.
I'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay, guys. Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye. Thank
Right.
you, Deepika.